In the quiet ranching community of Shadow Creek, Texas, a disabled veteran's peaceful existence is about to be shattered by an unexpected menace. Former Army Ranger James "Hawk" Harrison lost his leg in Afghanistan, but with unwavering determination, he's transformed his family's struggling ranch into a sanctuary for wounded veterans. What his neighbors don't know is that before his injury, Harrison wasn't just any soldier. He was one of Delta Force's most lethal operators, with over 200 successful missions in the darkest corners of the world. When the notorious Sinaloa Cartel begins quietly buying up local farms to establish trafficking routes, they see Harrison's disability as a sign of weakness. Their decision to pressure the stubborn rancher into selling triggers a chain of events that will awaken a force they never expected to encounter. In Shadow Creek, appearances can be deceiving, and some wounds make a warrior even more dangerous. The morning sun cast long shadows across Harrison's weathered fence posts as he worked methodically, checking the stability of each one. His prosthetic leg, modified with his own improvements, allowed him to move with practiced efficiency across the uneven ground. The autumn air carried hints of mesquite and desert sage, mingling with the earthy scent of his cattle grazing in the distance. Alisa Martinez, his ranch foreman and fellow veteran, approached in her dusty pickup. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Morning, Hawk. Council meeting yesterday was interesting. Got some new players in town." Harrison straightened, years of training making him instantly alert to the undertone in her voice. "Define interesting." Group called Nueva Vida Investments. Been buying up properties along the border, offering 3 times market value, cash. "Oh, deals." Alisa's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much to believe in coincidences. "They're particularly interested in ranches with good road access." Harrison nodded, processing the information with the same tactical precision that had kept him alive in countless operations. Nueva Vida, new life. The cartels weren't known for subtle naming. "Who's taken the offers?" "Thompson's sold last week. Mitchell's considering. They're targeting the struggling ones first." Alisa paused, studying her former commander. Even with one leg, he carried himself with the same quiet authority that had led their unit through hell and back. "They'll be coming here next." The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. 3 black SUVs, pristine despite the dusty roads, rolled up to Harrison's gate. The lead vehicle's window lowered, revealing a face that seemed crafted for corporate boardrooms rather than border towns. "Mr. Harrison," the man called out, his accent carefully neutral. "I'm Miguel Ortiz, representing Nueva Vida Investments. We've heard excellent things about your property." Harrison moved forward with measured steps, every movement deliberate. Years of operating in hostile territory had taught him to read the subtle signs others missed. The way the other SUVs positioned themselves, the slight bulges in the passengers' jackets, the practiced stillness of men ready for violence. "My ranch isn't for sale," Harrison replied evenly, positioning himself where he could observe all 3 vehicles. Ortiz's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "Perhaps we could discuss this over coffee? Our company has very generous terms for veterans. We understand the challenges you face." Alisa shifted slightly, her hand casually moving closer to the small of her back, where Harrison knew she carried her Glock. Like him, her time in service had left her with finely tuned instincts. "The only challenge I face," Harrison responded. He is finding time to manage all the improvements we're making. The veteran rehabilitation program is expanding next month. Ortiz's smile flickered. Admirable work. But surely with your condition, the physical demands must be overwhelming. Our offer would ensure a comfortable retirement. My condition? Harrison's voice carried no anger, just the deadly calm his operators had learned to recognize. I appreciate your concern, but this ranch isn't going anywhere. The back window of the second SUV lowered slightly. Harrison caught the quick assessment taking place, categorizing him as a threat or an obstacle. He'd seen that look countless times in his former life. The cold calculation of predators measuring their prey. Think about it, Mr. Harrison, Ortiz insisted. Times are changing. Small ranchers like yourself. Accidents happen. Equipment fails. Fires start. Why risk everything when we're offering such a generous solution? The threat hung in the air, clear as the Texas sun. Harrison had heard similar words in a dozen languages across 4 continents. The vocabulary changed, but the meaning remained constant. Submit or suffer. I appreciate you taking the time to visit, Harrison replied, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. But this ranch belongs to the veterans who find their way here. It's not for sale at any price. Ortiz's facade cracked slightly, revealing something harder beneath. We'll be in touch. Change is coming to Shadow Creek, Mr. Harrison. Best be on the right side of it. As the SUVs pulled away, Alisa moved closer. They'll be back. Yes, Harrison agreed, watching the dust trails disappear. But they don't know what they're walking into. The day progressed with its usual rhythm, but Harrison remained alert. He'd learned long ago that threats rarely announce themselves. As he worked with a group of veterans rebuilding the old barn, his mind catalogued the ranch's vulnerabilities, potential defensive positions, lines of sight. Dr. Elena Chen, who ran the ranch's physical therapy program, approached as the sun began to set. The new guys are settling in well, she reported, referring to their latest group of recovering veterans. But I heard about our visitors. Should we be worried? Harrison considered her question carefully. Elena had been their unit's trauma surgeon in Afghanistan, had seen firsthand what happened when violence invaded peaceful places. Not worried, he replied, but prepared. Later that night, as Harrison sat on his porch cleaning his prosthetic, Sheriff Tom Cooper's patrol car pulled up. The aging lawman had been Shadow Creek's conscience for 3 decades, had watched the town weather countless storms. Got some information you should know, Tom said without preamble. Nueva Vida isn't just buying land. They're establishing presence. Thompson's place? Already seeing unusual traffic at night. Mitchell said they threatened his grandkids when he hesitated. Harrison absorbed this, feeling the familiar shift in his mind. The tactical assessment that had guided him through countless operations. They're moving fast, confident. Too confident, Tom agreed, like they know something we don't. County commissioner's been acting strange too, pushing hard for these land deals to go through. The night air carried the sound of coyotes in the distance. Harrison remembered similar nights in Afghanistan, waiting for threats to materialize from the darkness. They think they're dealing with broken men, he said quietly. They don't understand what this place really is. Tom's radio crackled with updates about suspicious vehicles near the county line. This isn't just about land, is it? No, Harrison confirmed. They're establishing a corridor, Shadow Creek's location, the remote roads, the struggling economy, it's perfect for their operation, and they're used to people backing down. "But you won't," Tom stated, knowing the answer. Harrison thought about the veterans who'd found purpose. Here, the lives being rebuilt, the community that had welcomed them. Some things are worth fighting for. As Tom's patrol car disappeared into the night, Harrison felt the familiar tension building, the calm before inevitable storm. The cartels had chosen Shadow Creek carefully, had done their research. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought they were targeting a disabled veteran struggling to run a ranch. Instead, they'd awakened something far more dangerous. A Delta operator who'd spent his career hunting predators just like them. And this time, he wasn't just protecting a mission objective, he was protecting home. The night settled around the ranch, carrying whispers of the conflict to come. In the darkness, Harrison began his preparations. Some battles chose you, and when they did, the only choice was how to face them. Shadow Creek was about to learn that some veterans never stopped being warriors. They just found different battles to fight. The morning sun hadn't yet crested the Texas horizon when James Harrison began his daily routine, the rhythmic tap of his prosthetic leg echoing across the weathered boards of his front porch. Despite the early hour, activity already stirred across the ranch. Veterans working through their morning exercises, ranch hands preparing for the day's tasks, the quiet determination of people rebuilding their lives one day at a time. Alisa Martinez's voice carried across the yard as she directed the morning feed rotation. 3 years as his ranch foreman had honed her natural leadership abilities, transforming the skills she'd learned as a combat medic into something equally vital. "Morning, Hawk. Perimeter check showed some interesting tracks last night." Harrison paused, noting the careful neutrality in her tone. "Show me." They walked together toward the south fence line, where the ranch bordered Thompson's old property. Fresh tire tracks cut through the morning dew, parallel to their fence. "They're watching," Alisa said quietly, "learning our routines." "Good," Harrison replied, kneeling to examine the tracks more closely. "Let them learn the wrong lessons." Dr. Elena Chen joined them, her clipboard tucked under one arm. At 45, she carried herself with the same precise efficiency that had made her one of the military's top trauma surgeons. "Our new arrivals are asking questions about the SUVs they saw yesterday. They're worried about bringing trouble." "To the ranch," Harrison straightened, his prosthetic moving smoothly through the motion. Years of modifications had turned the standard issue leg into something uniquely suited to his needs. They've all seen enough trouble. This isn't on them. The ranch had become a sanctuary over the past 3 years, veterans finding their way, back from physical and psychological wounds, learning to trust themselves again, discovering new purpose. Harrison had built it using his military pension and the skills he'd acquired through 2 decades of service. The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. 2 pickup trucks, dusty and well-used, carrying familiar faces. Brian Mitchell and his son Luke pulled up to the fence line, their expressions grim. "They came back last night," Brian announced without preamble. 3 men, very professional, made it clear that refusing their offer would be unwise for my family's health. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I can't risk my grandkids, Hawk. I'm selling." Harrison absorbed this news, recognizing the tactical significance. Mitchell's ranch connected directly to his northern border. "I understand, Brian. Family comes first." They're not just buying land, Luke added, his voice carrying the edge of someone too young to hide their anger. They're buying silence. Dad tried talking to the county commissioner about the threats. Got shut down hard. Alisa's phone buzzed with a text. Her expression tightened as she read it. Thompson's place is already changing. New security cameras, guards patrolling. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. The morning sun finally crested the horizon, painting the Texas landscape in shades of gold and shadow. Harrison watched as his veterans began their daily routines, some working with the horses in the therapy program, others helping with ranch maintenance. Each one carrying visible and invisible wounds, each one finding their way back to themselves. They don't think they're being clever, Harrison observed quietly, using legitimate businesses as cover, targeting vulnerable properties, establishing presence gradually. Standard cartel expansion tactics. Elena raised an eyebrow. You've seen this before? Different places, different organizations, same playbook. Harrison's mind flickered back to operations in a dozen countries, tracking similar patterns. They start with economic pressure, move to threats, then escalate to examples. Speaking of examples, Alisa interjected. Sheriff Cooper called. Fire. At the Wilson place last night. Nothing serious, but the message was clear. They're getting bolder. Harrison nodded, processing this new information with the same tactical precision that had guided him through countless missions. They're following a timeline. Each move calculated, each response measured. They're used to people falling in line. The sound of helicopter rotors drew their attention skyward. A sleek private chopper passed overhead, heading toward Thompson's ranch. Cartel brass, Harrison noted, coming to check their investment. Brian Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. What choice do we have, Hawk? They've got money, connections, people in their pocket. We're just ranchers. No, Harrison corrected gently. We're more than that. This ranch, what we've built here, it's not just about raising cattle or growing crops. It's about giving people back their purpose, their strength. Eleanor's phone chimed with a message. 3 more veterans arriving next week, 2 from Afghanistan, 1 from Iraq. All need long-term rehabilitation. They'll have it, Harrison stated firmly. This place isn't going anywhere. As Brian and Luke departed, Alisa moved closer. They'll use Mitchell's ranch to surround us, cut off our access points, isolate us from support. Standard encirclement, Harrison agreed. But they're making assumptions. They see a disabled veteran running a rehabilitation ranch. They think they know what they're dealing with. The morning progressed with its usual routine, but Harrison noticed the subtle changes. His veterans were more alert, watching the boundaries, with professional attention. They'd all faced threats before, recognized the signs of approaching conflict. Dr. Chen approached as Harrison finished reviewing the ranch's security systems. The therapy program's making real progress. Jason's walking without crutches now. Maria's PTSD episodes are decreasing. This place, it gives them hope. Harrison thought about the countless missions he'd led, the operations that had taken him to the darkest corners of the world. None had felt as important as what they'd built here. Hope's worth protecting. Alisa's voice crackled over the radio. Hawk, we've got company, different from yesterday. 2 black SUVs approached the main gate, but these moved differently, more aggressive, less concerned with maintaining appearances. The lead vehicle stopped, and a man stepped out who carried himself with military precision. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Colonel Harrison," he called out, using a rank that few knew. "Or do you prefer Hawk? I'm Marcus Vega, security consultant. For Nueva Vida Investments, I believe we have mutual acquaintances." Harrison studied the man, recognizing the stance, the careful positioning. Former special operations, probably turned mercenary. "Can't say that I do." Vega's smile widened slightly. "No? Perhaps you remember Kandahar, 2015? You led the operation that disrupted certain business arrangements. Cost some people a lot. Of money, the pieces clicked into place. The cartel's quick focus on Shadow Creek, their specific interest in his ranch. This wasn't just about establishing new routes. It was personal. That was a long time ago," Harrison replied evenly. "I'm retired now, just a rancher." "Of course," Vega agreed smoothly. "And we're just businessmen, looking to invest in the community. But history has a way of repeating itself, doesn't it? People making the wrong choices, facing the consequences." Alisa had positioned herself strategically, covering angles. Like Harrison, she'd recognized the threat beneath the corporate veneer. "I'll be direct," Vega continued. "You're going to sell. The only question is, how much pain comes first? Your ranch, your veterans, your little rehabilitation program, all of it can disappear, just like that operation in Kandahar." Harrison felt the familiar calm settling over him, the clarity that came before combat. "You should leave now." Vega's facade dropped completely. "You're not in the sandbox anymore, Colonel. No backup, no air support, no high-speed team. Just a crippled old soldier playing farmer. Think carefully about your next move." As the SUVs departed, Alisa moved closer. "They're not just cartel, they're professionals." "Yes," Harrison agreed, watching the dust trails disappear. "Which means they'll follow patterns, stick to procedures. We can use that." The day continued, but something had shifted. The ranch's peaceful routine now carried an undercurrent of preparation. Veterans who'd come here to heal found themselves drawing on old skills, watching boundaries, noting approaches. They were all warriors who'd found peace. But peace, they knew, sometimes had to be defended. Dawn broke over Shadow Creek as Harrison reviewed satellite maps of the surrounding ranches, his trained eye marking changes in traffic patterns, new security installations, altered landscape. 3 weeks had passed since Vega's visit, and the cartel's presence grew more obvious daily. Thompson's ranch had become a fortress. Mitchell's property now hosted regular convoys, and the quiet border town was transforming beneath a surge of suspicious prosperity. "They're moving faster than expected," Alisa observed, spreading out recent surveillance photos. New construction at Thompson's, reinforced gates, guard towers disguised as windmills. "They're not even pretending anymore." Sheriff Cooper's patrol car kicked up dust as it approached the main house. The aging lawman's face carried the weight of bad news. County commissioner just rammed through new zoning laws. "They're trying to classify your rehabilitation program as a commercial medical facility, saying you need permits that don't exist." Harrison absorbed this information with the same tactical precision that had guided him through countless operations. Legal pressure, standard softening phase. "That's not all," Cooper continued, his voice tight. "State investigators looking into the fire at Wilson's place were suddenly reassigned. Got word that 3 more properties along the border reported suspicious accidents. People are scared." The sound of approaching motorcycles drew their attention. Tom Razor Callahan, leader of the local Veterans Motorcycle Club, rolled up with 4 of his riders. Like many in his group, Reza had served under Harrison in Afghanistan. Tried warning Mitchell about the convoy schedules. Reza reported, killing his engine. They're moving something big through his property at night. Heavy trucks, professional security, but he won't talk. Says his family's being watched. Harrison nodded, understanding the pressure his neighbors faced. They're establishing a corridor, using legitimate businesses as cover while they build. Their infrastructure. Elena approached from the therapy center, her expression concerned. 2 of our new veterans were approached in town. Offered security work at Thompson's ranch. Good money, no questions asked. They're recruiting, Alisa concluded, looking for people with military training who need cash. Harrison studied the changing landscape of his community. Shadow Creek had always been quiet, overlooked. Perfect for both his rehabilitation program and the cartel's purposes. Now, those purposes were colliding. A black SUV approached the main gate, different from Vega's vehicles. The driver, a woman in an expensive business suit, stepped out with practiced confidence. Mr. Harrison, I'm Diana Reyes, representing the Shadow Creek Economic Development Council. We've received complaints about your operation. Harrison recognized the tactic, death by bureaucracy. All our permits are current, Ms. Reyes. We've operated without issue for 3 years. Yes, well, regulations change, she replied smoothly. There are concerns about unlicensed medical care, zoning violations, environmental impact. The council feels an inspection is warranted. Alisa shifted slightly, positioning herself better. Interesting timing. The council's never shown much interest before. Reyes's smile remained fixed. Progress brings scrutiny, Ms. Martinez. Shadow Creek is changing. Everyone needs to adapt. Or what? Reza asked, his voice carrying an edge. More accidents? More fires? I'm simply here about compliance issues, Reyes responded coolly. Though I understand property insurance can be quite expensive these days, especially for facilities with special needs residents. The threat was clear. Harrison had seen this pattern before. Legal pressure combined with implied violence. Break the target's support structure, isolate them, then move in for the kill. We'll expect your inspection team Monday, Harrison replied, and calmly. Bring whatever experts you need. As Reyes departed, Eleanor voiced what they were all thinking. They're coming at us from all angles. Because we're a threat, Harrison explained. Not just my history with them in Kandahar. This ranch, what we've built here, it goes against their whole operation. They need the community broken, dependent. We show another way. The day progressed with renewed purpose. Veterans who'd come for healing found themselves drawing on old skills, watching approaches, noting patterns. The ranch's peaceful routine acquired a sharper edge. Alisa's radio crackled with reports from their security patrols. Movement at the south fence line. They're probing, testing response times. Harrison knew the pattern. Before any major operation, you gathered intelligence, learned the target's rhythms. The cartel was professional, methodical. They'd watch, plan, then strike at their chosen moment. A truck arrived from town, carrying supplies and news. Jason, Chen, Elena's brother, and the local hardware store owner looked troubled. They're buying up water rights, Hawk, using shell companies. But it's them, getting ready to control the whole region's supply. Harrison absorbed this information, adding it to his tactical assessment. Control resources, create dependency, establish dominance. The cartel was following their standard playbook. The sound of helicopters drew their attention skyward. 2 private choppers passed overhead, heading toward Thompson's ranch. More bosses are coming to check their investment, Razor observed. They're spending serious money here because Shadow Creek matters, Harrison replied. Perfect location, minimal law enforcement presence, struggling economy. They're not just building a trafficking route, they're establishing a base of operations. Elena's phone buzzed with a message. Her expression tightened. County Medical Board just announced a review of all rehabilitation facilities, claiming concerns about unlicensed practitioners in rural areas. They're trying to shut down our therapy program, Alisa concluded. Cut off our funding, our legitimacy. Harrison watched his veterans going about their daily tasks. Some working with horses, others maintaining equipment, all finding their way back from various wounds. Each one represented something the cartel couldn't control. Strength through healing, power through community. Razor's riders reported more changes in town. Businesses being pressured to use specific suppliers, banks suddenly reviewing loans, property taxes being reassessed. The cartel was tightening its grip on Shadow Creek's economic lifelines. A dust trail approached from the direction of Mitchell's ranch. Luke Mitchell's truck arrived at high speed, his face tight with anger. They're moving heavy equipment onto our property tonight. Dad tried to ask questions, got shut down hard. Said we need to stay in the house, away from windows. Harrison recognized the escalation. The cartel was done playing subtle. They were establishing their presence openly now, daring anyone to challenge them. Sheriff Cooper's radio crackled with updates about suspicious vehicles near the county line. More resources moving in, more pieces being positioned. The noose was tightening around Shadow Creek. They think they're being clever, Harrison observed, his tactical mind analyzing patterns. Using legitimate businesses, legal pressure, economic control, standard insurgency tactics. Take over a region by controlling its infrastructure. Alisa, who'd seen similar operations during her service, nodded in understanding. But they're not just fighting locals now, they're facing veterans who've dealt with these tactics before. As evening approached, Harrison gathered his core team. Elena, Alisa, Razor, and Sheriff Cooper met in the ranch's main office, spreading out maps and reports. The pattern was clear. The cartel was establishing a sophisticated operation, using Shadow Creek's isolation to their advantage. Mondays. Inspection is a trap, Alisa stated flatly. They'll find violations because they're writing the regulations. Use it as an excuse to shut us down. Harrison agreed, remembering similar tactics from his operations against cartel networks. They want to appear legitimate while they strangle the community, make resistance seem pointless. Eleanor studied the medical board's review notice. They're not just targeting us. Every independent business, every potential source of resistance, they're all facing sudden regulatory concerns. The night settled around them, carrying whispers of approaching conflict. Harrison felt the familiar tension, the calm before combat that he'd known in a dozen war zones. But this time was different. This wasn't about completing a mission or disrupting an enemy operation. This was about protecting home. Shadow Creek was about to learn that some veterans never stopped being warriors. They just found different battles to fight, and this battle was just beginning. Pre-dawn stillness wrapped around Shadow Creek as Harrison completed his final preparations. The previous night's warning from Vega hung heavy in the air, mixing with the scent of approaching rain. Movement at Thompson's ranch had increased, vehicles arriving under cover of darkness, positions being established. "They're setting up containment points," Alisa reported, studying thermal imaging feeds on her tablet. "Professional teams, military precision, at least 3 sniper positions covering our main approaches." Harrison nodded, recognizing the tactical deployment. The cartel wasn't just sending thugs, they were positioning trained operators. They'll wait for the inspection team. Use any confrontation as justification. Dr. Elena Chen approached from the medical building, her expression grim. "Just got word from the county medical board. They're sending their own specialists with the inspection team, people no one's ever heard of. More cartel plants," Sheriff Cooper confirmed, joining them with fresh intelligence. "Checked their credentials, all registered last week through an agency in Austin. Same one that's been hiring security consultants for Thompson's ranch." The sound of engines drew their attention to the main road. A convoy approached, not the usual black SUVs, but official-looking government vehicles. Diana Reyes stepped out of the lead car, accompanied by a team of suited inspectors. "Mr. Harrison," she called out, her professional smile failing to mask predatory intent. "I believe we're scheduled for a facility inspection. I hope you don't mind that we arrived early. The council is quite eager to address these safety concerns." Harrison moved forward with measured steps, positioning himself strategically. The inspection wasn't scheduled until Monday. "Plans change," Reyes replied smoothly. "We have reports of unauthorized medical procedures, zoning violations, potential environmental hazards. The council feels immediate action is warranted." Alisa had positioned their veterans carefully, some working with the horses, others maintaining equipment, all of them combat-trained and alert. The ranch's morning routine continued, but with underlying tension. "Of course," Harrison agreed calmly, "though you'll understand if our own experts observe the inspection. Dr. Chen's credentials are impeccable." Reyes's smile tightened slightly. "That won't be necessary. Our team is fully qualified to—" The sudden sound of rotors cut through the morning air. A helicopter appeared over the ridge, flying low and fast. Not the cartel's usual sleek aircraft, but a military transport. It landed in Harrison's south field, kicking up dust and debris. Colonel James Anderson emerged, followed by a team of federal agents. Harrison recognized his former commanding officer immediately, the man who'd led their Delta Force unit through countless operations. "Sorry to interrupt," Anderson announced, approaching with purposeful stride. "But this property is now part of a federal investigation. I'm afraid your inspection will have to wait." Reyes's composure cracked slightly. "This is a local matter. The council has authority." "The council," Anderson cut in smoothly, "might want to explain its recent connections to certain international organizations. My team has some very interesting questions about Shadow Creek's sudden economic boom." Harrison watched the subtle shift in dynamics. Reyes's inspection team began retreating to their vehicles, their confidence evaporating under federal scrutiny. But he knew this wasn't over, just changing form. "You okay, Hawk?" Anderson asked quietly as the council vehicles departed. "Heard you might need some backup." "Timing's perfect," Harrison replied, noting movement at Thompson's ranch. The cartel's observation posts were already adjusting, analyzing this new threat. "Though they won't back down easily." "No," Anderson agreed. "This operation's too important. To them, Shadow Creek's perfect for their purposes. Remote, struggling economy, minimal law enforcement presence. They've invested too much to walk away." Alisa approached with updated thermal imaging. They're repositioning, pulling back their obvious assets, but maintaining coverage. Professional response. Because they're professionals, Anderson confirmed. Ex-military, private contractors, corrupt officials, the cartel's building something bigger than just trafficking routes. They're establishing a power base. Eleanor joined them, medical records in hand. The therapy program sanctions, the regulatory pressure, it was all coordinated. They're trying to dismantle everything that makes the community strong. Standard insurgency tactics. Harrison nodded. Control resources, create dependency, eliminate resistance. They're not just buying land, they're buying control. The morning progressed with new energy. Anderson's team moved efficiently, documenting cartel activities, establishing surveillance positions. But Harrison knew the real battle was just beginning. They'll adapt, he observed, watching movement through high-powered optics. Switch to alternative routes, activate other assets. This is just one piece of their operation. A crucial piece, Anderson replied. Shadow Creek's location makes it perfect for their expansion plans. Losing control here disrupts their whole timeline. Razor's motorcycle roared up the drive, carrying fresh intelligence. They're pulling out of Thompson's ranch. Professional withdrawal, taking key equipment, but they're leaving their local muscle in place. Harrison recognized the tactical shift. They're switching to distributed operations, harder to track, harder to disrupt. Sheriff Cooper's radio crackled with updates. Suspicious vehicles moving along back roads, new properties being approached with investment opportunities. The cartel was adjusting, not retreating. Got something, Alisa called out, studying satellite feeds. Heavy equipment moving through Mitchell's property. They're relocating their processing operation. Anderson's team moved quickly, coordinating with federal assets. But Harrison knew they couldn't be everywhere. The cartel had spent months embedding themselves in Shadow Creek's infrastructure. A black SUV approached the main gate. Marcus Vega, making one final play. Impressive show, Colonel, he called out, noting the federal presence. But temporary. We've invested too much in this community to walk away. Community? Harrison replied calmly. Or control. Vega's smile carried no warmth. Same thing, ultimately. People need structure, direction. We provide that. Your little rehabilitation program, your veteran sanctuary. It's all very noble. But nobility doesn't feed families or pay mortgages. No, Harrison agreed, but it builds something stronger than fear. As Vega departed, Anderson approached with fresh intelligence. He's right about one thing. This is temporary. We can disrupt their obvious operations, but they've embedded themselves too deeply. They'll go quiet. Wait us out. Harrison nodded, understanding the challenge. Shadow Creek's battle wouldn't be won with one federal raid. The cartel had spent months building their network, establishing control through 1,000 small pressures. Then we build something stronger, he replied, watching his veterans work. Each one carrying wounds, each one finding new purpose. Something they can't control or corrupt. The day continued with renewed purpose. Anderson's team documented evidence, tracked assets, built their case. But Harrison knew the real fight was just beginning. The cartel wouldn't abandon their plans easily. They'd adapt, evolve, find new approaches. As evening approached, the true scope of their challenge became clear. The cartel had woven themselves into Shadow Creek's fabric, using legitimate businesses as cover while they established their real operation. Federal intervention might disrupt their timeline, but it wouldn't break their grip. That would require something else. something the cartel hadn't counted on when they targeted a disabled veterans ranch. It would require warriors who understood that some battles couldn't be won with raids or arrests. Warriors who knew that true victory came from building something stronger than fear. Shadow Creek was about to learn that lesson. The real fight was just beginning. The federal presence brought temporary calm to Shadow Creek, but Harrison recognized it for what it was: the eye of the storm. Colonel Anderson's team had disrupted the cartel's obvious operations, forced them to adapt, but their grip on the community remained strong. "They're switching tactics," Alisa reported, studying surveillance feeds. "Moving in smaller groups, using civilian vehicles, more subtle now but still active." Harrison watched through high-powered optics as another convoy left Thompson's ranch under cover of early morning darkness. They're dispersing assets, spreading their operation across multiple properties, making it harder to track. Sheriff Cooper arrived with fresh intelligence, his expression troubled. County Commissioner called an emergency meeting. They're pushing through new land use regulations, trying to restrict federal access to private property. "Legal countermeasures," Anderson observed, joining them by the observation post. "Standard response when their obvious operations get compromised. They'll go quiet, work through legitimate businesses while they rebuild." Elena approached from the medical building, papers in hand. Medical board suddenly reversed their sanctions, said it was all a misunderstanding, but they've added new oversight requirements, weekly inspections, detailed patient records, keeping tabs on our veterans. Harrison nodded, understanding the tactic. Watching who comes and goes, gathering intelligence while appearing legitimate. The sound of motorcycles announced Razor's arrival. His riders had been monitoring back roads, tracking the cartel's new movement patterns. "They're setting up smaller processing sites," he reported, using ranch outbuildings, old barns. Harder to spot from the air. Movement at Mitchell's property drew their attention. Heavy equipment moved under tarps, being repositioned to less visible locations. Luke Mitchell's truck approached Harrison's gate, carrying warning. "They're changing the security setup," Luke reported quietly. "Less obvious now, but more professional." Dad overheard them talking about long-term infrastructure. "They're not leaving, just adapting." Harrison absorbed this information with tactical precision. The cartel was following a familiar playbook. When direct pressure failed, switch to infiltration and gradual control. A convoy of unmarked vehicles approached from town. Diana Reyes emerged, her corporate facade firmly in place despite recent setbacks. "Mr. Harrison, the Economic Development Council has reviewed its position. We're prepared to be more flexible in our approach." "Meaning?" Harrison asked, though he already knew the answer. "Meaning we understand the value of your rehabilitation program." Reyes smiled without warmth. "Perhaps we can find a compromise that benefits everyone. The community needs stability, after all." Anderson moved closer, his federal credentials prominently displayed. "Interesting timing for compromise." "The council serves local interests," Reyes replied smoothly. "Federal intervention is temporary. Community needs are permanent." The threat was clear. They could wait out federal oversight, maintain their grip through legitimate channels. Shadow Creek's transformation would just take longer. As Reyes departed, Alisa shared updated surveillance data. They're establishing new supply routes, using smaller roads, civilian traffic as cover. Professional adaptation. Because they're professionals, Anderson confirmed. This isn't just some local operation. Shadow Creek's part of something bigger. a network of controlled communities providing infrastructure for their entire organization. Harrison watched his veterans going about their daily tasks, each one carrying visible and invisible wounds, each one finding new purpose. The cartel had chosen this community carefully, seeing its isolation as weakness. They're counting on federal resources being limited, Cooper observed. No, we can't maintain constant presence. No, Harrison agreed. But we can build something that lasts longer than raids or arrests. A helicopter passed overhead, not military this time, but private. Heading toward a new landing zone the cartel had established on remote ranch land. They were adapting quickly, professionally. Elena's phone buzzed with another message from the medical board. They're offering to partner with our therapy program now. Want to provide additional resources and professional oversight. Trying to embed themselves in everything that makes the community strong, Alisa concluded. Control through cooperation instead of force. The day progressed with subtle tension. Anderson's team documented new cartel movements, tracked adapting patterns, but Harrison knew they were fighting shadows now. The enemy had learned to blend with legitimate business. Razor's riders reported more changes in town, businesses that had resisted cartel pressure suddenly finding new opportunities, better supply deals, preferred lending terms. The message was clear. Cooperation brought rewards. They're offering carrots now instead of sticks, Anderson noted, reviewing intelligence reports. More effective in the long run. People accept gradual control easier than obvious force. Harrison remembered similar tactics from his Delta Force days. Some enemies couldn't be defeated with direct action. They had to be outlasted, outbuilt, their influence replaced with something stronger. A dust trail approached from the county road. Jason Chen's truck arrived with supplies and news from town. They're starting community improvement projects now, he reported. Parks, road repairs, small business grants, making themselves look like saviors. Standard hearts and minds tactics, Harrison observed. Make the community dependent on their presence, resistant to outside intervention. Alisa's radio crackled with updates from their security patrols. More subtle movement along the borders, more professional observation posts being established. The cartel was settling in for a long game. The afternoon brought new challenges. Thompson's Ranch began hosting community events, offering local businesses networking opportunities. Mitchell's property became a hub for agricultural consulting, providing farmers with expert advice on improving their operations. They're embedding themselves deeper, Cooper warned, watching another convoy of unmarked vehicles pass through town, using legitimate businesses to mask their real activities. Harrison nodded, recognizing the strategy. The cartel was building, influence through 1,000 small connections, making their presence seem normal, necessary. Anderson's team documented what they could, but proving criminal intent behind legitimate business was nearly impossible. The enemy had learned from previous defeats, adapted their methods. As evening approached, the true scope of their challenge became clear. The cartel hadn't just targeted Shadow Creek for its location, they'd chosen it for its vulnerabilities. A struggling community was easier to control through economic pressure and false opportunity. Federal presence will end soon, Anderson admitted as his team prepared to depart. We've disrupted their obvious operations, but their infrastructure remains. They'll rebuild, adapt, continue. Harrison watched the sun set over his changed community. Shadow Creek's battle wouldn't be won with raids or arrests. The cartel had woven themselves too deeply into the town's fabric. Victory would require something else, something the enemy hadn't counted on when they targeted a disabled veteran's ranch. It would require warriors who understood that some battles were won through building, not destroying, through creating something stronger than fear or control. The real fight was just beginning, and Shadow Creek was about to learn that true strength came from the most unexpected places. As federal resources withdrew from Shadow Creek, the cartel's influence crystallized in subtler ways. Harrison observed the changes from his ranch's observation post. Civilian vehicles replacing black SUVs, business meetings substituting for obvious surveillance, economic pressure replacing direct threats. They're integrating deeper, Alisa reported, reviewing their latest intelligence. Using Thompson's ranch as a business hub, Mitchell's property for agricultural consulting. Every legitimate operation masking something else. Colonel Anderson's final briefing echoed in Harrison's mind. The cartel wasn't just establishing trafficking routes, they were building a model of community control that could be replicated across the border region. "Got movement at the south fence line," Razor called over the radio. His riders had maintained constant patrols since the federal departure. 2 vehicles trying to look casual. Professional observation team. Harrison studied the approaching dust trails through his scope. The observers maintained perfect distance, their civilian trucks blending with normal ranch traffic. "They're testing our security gaps, learning our new patterns." Elena arrived with morning updates from the therapy program. Medical board's new oversight requirements are specific. They want detailed records of every veteran's treatment background, length of stay, building profiles. Intelligence gathering. Alisa nodded, recognizing the tactic. Using legitimate channels to map our operation. Sheriff Cooper's patrol car approached, carrying fresh concerns. County Commissioner pushed through those new regulations. Any property hosting therapeutic programs needs weekly safety inspections. They're creating excuses for constant access. The sound of helicopter rotors drew their attention skyward. A private aircraft approached Thompson's ranch, its sleek design marking it as cartel leadership. They were adapting their command structure, embedding it within legitimate business. Diana Reyes's unmarked sedan rolled up to Harrison's gate, her corporate smile firmly in place. "Mr. Harrison, the Economic Development Council has exciting news. We're launching a veteran support initiative. Your program would be perfect as a partner." "Partner?" Harrison questioned, noting the subtle positioning of vehicles beyond Reyes's. "Car, professional security, maintaining distance while establishing coverage. The community needs successful examples of cooperation," Reyes explained smoothly. "Your rehabilitation work is admirable. With proper support and oversight, it could expand significantly." Alisa moved closer, her combat-trained senses noting multiple observation points being established. "Proper support meaning control. Structure," Reyes corrected, her smile never wavering. "The council believes in supporting local success stories. Of course, that support requires certain alignments of interest." The message was clear: cooperate and prosper, resist and face escalating pressure. The cartel had learned to weaponize legitimate business practices. As Reyes departed, Luke Mitchell's truck approached, carrying fresh intelligence. "They're expanding the operation at our place," he reported quietly. "Building new storage facilities, upgrading roads. Dad's not even allowed in certain areas anymore." Harrison absorbed this information with tactical precision. The cartel was establishing permanent infrastructure, confident in their control of local authorities. "They're offering business loans now," Jason Chen added, arriving with supplies. And from town, special rates for approved vendors, creating a network of dependent operations. The day progressed with subtle tension. Veterans who'd come for healing found themselves drawing on old skills, watching approaches, noting patterns. The ranch's peaceful routine acquired a sharper edge. Razor's riders reported more changes in town. Businesses that had resisted cartel, influence suddenly facing supply problems, banking issues, regulatory scrutiny. The message was clear: cooperation brought prosperity, resistance brought complications. "They're not just buying control," Harrison observed, studying satellite imagery of changed property layouts. "They're building a self-sustaining system, each legitimate business providing cover for part of their operation." Elena's phone buzzed with another medical board notification. "They're implementing new patient acceptance guidelines. Want prior approval for all new veterans entering the program. Controlling who we can help," Alisa concluded, "screening for potential threats to their operation." The afternoon brought more subtle changes. Thompson's Ranch hosted a community barbecue, offering local businesses networking opportunities. Mitchell's property became a hub for agricultural seminars, providing farmers with expert consultations. "Creating dependency," Cooper noted, watching another convoy of unmarked vehicles pass through town, "making their presence seem normal, necessary." Harrison remembered similar tactics from his Delta Force operations. Some enemies couldn't be defeated through direct confrontation. They had to be outlasted, their influence replaced with something stronger. Alisa's radio crackled with updates from their security patrols. More professional observation posts being established, more subtle monitoring of ranch activities. The cartel was settling in for a long-term presence. A dust trail approached from the county road. Marcus Vega's civilian truck arrived, his corporate facade firmly in place. "Quite the operation you're maintaining here, Colonel," he observed, studying the ranch's security measures. "Very professional, very resistant to progress." "Progress being control?" Harrison asked, noting the positions of Vega's hidden security team. "Progress being reality," Vega replied smoothly. "Shadow Creek's changing. The community needs structure, stability. We provide that. Your rehabilitation program could benefit significantly from proper partnership." "Like Mitchell's ranch, Thompson's operation?" Alisa challenged. "Legitimate businesses fronting for something else?" Vega's smile carried no warmth. "Everything fronts for something else, Ms. Martinez. The question is whether you front for progress or obstruction." As Vega departed, Harrison felt the familiar tension building, the calm before inevitable conflict. The cartel had learned from their previous confrontation, adapted their methods. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought switching to subtle pressure would make him easier to control. Instead, it had given him time to build something stronger. The evening brought new reports from their surveillance network. The cartel's operation was expanding, using legitimate businesses to establish infrastructure across the region. Shadow Creek was becoming a model for their new approach, control through economic influence rather than obvious force. "They're playing a longer game now," Alisa observed, reviewing intelligence data, "building influence through 1,000 small pressures instead of direct threats." Harrison nodded, watching his veterans work through their daily routines. each, one carrying visible and invisible wounds, each one finding new purpose. The cartel had chosen this community carefully, seeing its isolation as weakness, but they'd made a fundamental error in judgment. They thought targeting a disabled veteran's branch would be easier than confronting federal forces. They hadn't realized that some warriors never stopped fighting. They just found different battles. The real fight was just beginning, and Shadow Creek was about to learn that true strength came from the most unexpected places. Victory wouldn't come through raids or arrests. It would come through building something stronger than fear or control, something the cartel hadn't counted on when they chose their target. It would come through warriors who understood that some battles were won through creating, not destroying, through building connections that couldn't be bought or corrupted. The sun set over Shadow Creek, casting long shadows across changed landscape. But in those shadows, something was growing, something the cartel's influence couldn't touch, a strength born from healing, not hurting. From standing together, not standing aside. The real battle for Shadow Creek was just beginning, and this time the weapons wouldn't be guns or threats. They would be something far more powerful, the unbreakable bonds between warriors who had found their way home. Dawn painted Shadow Creek in shades of defiance as Harrison implemented the next phase of his counter-strategy. The cartel had spent months building influence through legitimate businesses. Now he would use their own tactics against them. Networks are in place, Alisa reported, coordinating with veteran-owned businesses across 3 counties. Every cartel-controlled supplier now has competition. Every pressured business has alternatives. Razor's motorcycle group had expanded, recruiting riders from military units across the state. Their presence along transport routes wasn't just surveillance anymore, it was a message. The community had protection. Medical supply chains are secured, Elena confirmed, reviewing their new distribution network. Veterans from 4 states volunteering their trucks, their routes. The cartel's monopoly on healthcare resources is breaking. Sheriff Cooper arrived with fresh intelligence, his expression carrying new hope. Their pressure on local businesses is backfiring. Every time they squeeze one operation, 3 veteran-owned alternatives pop up. Harrison watched through high-powered optics as another cartel convoy left Thompson's ranch. Their movements were still professional, but carried a new urgency. Something was changing. They're losing control of key infrastructure, Alisa noted, studying surveillance feeds. Their legitimate businesses can't compete with our veteran network. Too much loyalty, too much determination. Diana Reyes's arrival carried none of her usual confidence. Her corporate smile cracked at the edges as she approached Harrison's gate. The Economic Development Council is concerned about unauthorized business operations. There are regulations, all properly filed, Harrison interrupted calmly. Every veteran-owned business meets code. Every operation fully documented. We learned from watching you. Reyes's composure slipped further. These sudden changes disrupt community stability. The council's development plans require consistent control, Alisa suggested, noting multiple observation points tracking Reyes's conversation, or just predictable targets. Luke Mitchell's truck approached at speed, carrying news that confirmed their strategy's impact. They're scaling back operations. At our place, he reported, barely containing his excitement. Dad says their agricultural consultants are pulling out. Can't compete with the new veteran-run consulting network. Harrison absorbed this information with tactical satisfaction. The cartel had built their influence through economic pressure. Now, They were facing the same tactics, amplified by military precision and warrior loyalty. "They're calling an emergency council meeting," Cooper added, his radio crackling with updates, trying to push through new business regulations, but they're facing resistance. Communities seen another way. Jason Chen arrived with supplies and intelligence from town. Their supply chain is fracturing. Every transport company they pressured now has veteran-owned alternatives. Their legitimate coverage is failing. The day progressed with growing energy. Harrison's veterans had transformed their rehabilitation exercises into business training, teaching newly arrived warriors how to establish operations that could counter cartel influence. "They're adapting again," Alisa reported, monitoring cartel movements, "trying to buy into our network, offering partnerships, but they can't match our connection to the community." Elena's phone buzzed with another message from the medical board. This time her smile carried genuine amusement. "They're withdrawing their oversight requirements. Seems our veteran-staffed medical transport service is making their monitoring unnecessary." Razor's riders reported more changes across Shadow Creek. Businesses that had feared cartel retaliation now found protection in numbers. Every threatened. Operation backed by a network of warrior-owned alternatives. A helicopter approached, cartel leadership arriving to assess the changing situation. But this time, 3 veteran-owned aircraft shadowed its approach, their presence a clear message. The skies over Shadow Creek weren't under singular control anymore. Marcus Vega's arrival carried none of his usual smooth confidence. His civilian vehicle seemed smaller somehow, less imposing against the backdrop of veteran-owned trucks filling the ranch's parking area. "Impressive adaptation, Colonel," he acknowledged, studying the transformed operation. "Using our own methods against us. Very professional. We learned from watching you," Harrison replied, noting the reduced security presence around Vega. "Every pressure point you created showed us where to build something stronger." "The community needs structure," Vega insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our investments are failing," Alisa completed, "because you built on control, not connection. Fear doesn't outlast loyalty." The afternoon brought more signs of shifting power. Thompson's Ranch hosted another business meeting, but this time local owners declined their invitations. Mitchell's property saw its cartel security detail reduced, their presence made redundant by veteran patrols. "They're pulling back," Cooper observed, watching another convoy depart. "Can't maintain operations when every legitimate business front faces real competition." Harrison remembered similar moments from his Delta Force days, when the enemy realized their strategy had been turned against them. The cartel had taught Shadow Creek valuable lessons about economic warfare. Alisa's radio crackled with updates from their expanded security network. Veteran-owned businesses were spreading beyond Shadow Creek, creating corridors of resistance against cartel influence. The evening brought new reports of cartel assets being relocated. Their model of community control through legitimate business was failing, undermined by a force they hadn't considered, warriors who understood their tactics. "They'll try something dramatic," Alisa warned, reviewing intelligence data. "Can't accept losing control without a fight." Harrison nodded, watching his veterans coordinate their growing network. The cartel had chosen Shadow Creek carefully, seeing its isolation as weakness. Instead, they'd created something unprecedented. A community of warriors united against corruption. Jason Chen's arrival carried fresh confirmation of their success. "They're selling their business interests," he reported, can't maintain control when every operation faces veteran competition. Communities choosing loyalty over fear. The sun set over a transformed Shadow Creek. What had started as a rehabilitation ranch had become something more, a model of resistance through reconstruction. The cartel had taught them how to build influence through legitimate business. Now that lesson was being used to break their power. Elena's final report for the day carried triumph. Veteran Medical Network is officially licensed, state approved. Our community care model, we're expanding to 3 more counties next month. Harrison felt the familiar satisfaction of a successful operation, but this victory was different. It wasn't about destroying an enemy's infrastructure, it was about building something stronger in its place. The cartel had thought switching to subtle pressure would make their target easier to control. Instead, they'd given him time to create an unbreakable network of warrior-owned businesses, each one dedicated to protecting their community. Shadow Creek had learned that true strength wasn't found in fear or control. It was built through connections that couldn't be bought or corrupted, through warriors who understood that some battles were won by creating, not destroying. The real fight wasn't over. The cartel wouldn't abandon their investment without a final push. But now they faced something they hadn't counted on. A community united by purpose, protected by warriors who had found their way home. Victory wouldn't come through violence or force. It would come through building something stronger than fear. Something the cartel's influence couldn't touch, a strength born from healing, not hurting. From standing together, not standing aside. The cartel's response came at midnight, swift and coordinated. Multiple explosions lit up Shadow Creek's darkness, targeting veteran-owned businesses across 3 counties. But Harrison's network had anticipated this. Evacuation protocols activated instantly, security teams already in position. No casualties, Alisa reported, coordinating responses from their command center. They hit empty buildings. Our surveillance caught their preparation, gave us time to protect our people. Razor's riders moved through the chaos with military precision. Each explosion met with immediate support. Veteran-owned emergency services, established during months of preparation, responded faster than the cartel's planned disruption. Medical teams deployed, Elena confirmed, directing their response network. Every targeted location has veteran support units on site. Communities seeing who really protects them. Sheriff Cooper's arrival carried grim determination. State police are overwhelmed, but our veteran security teams have contained the situation. Cartel didn't expect organized resistance. Harrison watched through thermal imaging as another wave of cartel operatives moved into position. Their tactics were professional, but predictable. They're following standard intimidation protocols, making a show of force, playing into our hands, Alisa noted, tracking multiple response teams. Every attack proves what we've been saying about their true nature, communities watching. Diana Reyes's voice crackled over intercepted communications, her corporate facade cracking under pressure. Control the narrative. These are random acts of vandalism, not coordinated. Too late, Harrison observed as media vehicles arrived, drawn by veteran sources. Truth's harder to hide when you've lost information control. Luke Mitchell's truck skidded into the ranch, carrying crucial intelligence. They're moving heavy, assets through our property. Dad overheard them. This is just phase 1. They're planning something bigger. Harrison absorbed this information with tactical precision. The cartel was committing their resources, abandoning subtlety for shock value. They're exposing themselves, making mistakes. Multiple incursion teams approaching the ranch, Alisa reported, monitoring thermal feeds. Professional operators trying to use the chaos as cover. Elena coordinated with their medical network as more veteran response units arrived. Every attack is strengthening our position. Communities seeing the difference between their control and our protection. The night air carried sounds of battle, not just explosions and sirens, but the coordinated response of warriors who'd trained for this moment. Harrison's veterans moved with practiced efficiency. Each attack met with immediate support. They're targeting our supply lines, Jason Chen reported, arriving with updates from their business network. Trying to isolate veteran-owned operations. But they don't understand what they're really fighting. Alisa's radio crackled with constant updates. Every cartel move met with prepared countermeasures. Every act of destruction countered by immediate reconstruction. The community was witnessing a different kind of strength. Marcus Vega's arrival carried desperate authority. His civilian vehicle, now accompanied by obvious security. This is your last chance, Colonel. Stand down. Let progress take its natural course. Progress? Harrison questioned, noting multiple cartel teams moving into position. Or just destruction dressed as change? Change requires force, Vega insisted, his corporate mask slipping. Communities need to learn. They're learning, Alisa interrupted, as veteran response teams contained another explosion. Just not the lesson you intended. The night progressed with coordinated chaos. Each cartel attack revealed more of their true nature. Each response demonstrated the strength of Harrison's network. Shadow Creek was witnessing the difference between control and protection. They're burning resources, Cooper observed, watching another cartel operation expose itself. Can't maintain legitimate cover while conducting open warfare. Harrison remembered similar moments from his Delta Force days, when the enemy's desperation forced them into the open. The cartel had abandoned subtlety for shock, trading long-term influence for immediate impact. Elena's medical teams moved with practiced precision, treating minor injuries while documenting every cartel action. The state authorities are responding now. Too much evidence to ignore. Razor's riders reported more cartel assets being exposed. Each attack revealed another layer of their operation. Each response demonstrated the community's true defenders. They're calling in reinforcements, Alisa reported, monitoring communications. Multiple teams converging on Shadow Creek. This is their full commitment. Harrison nodded, watching thermal signatures approach his ranch. The cartel was committing everything, abandoning their careful facade of legitimate business. They're showing their true nature. The pre-dawn hours brought escalation. Cartel operators targeted key infrastructure, trying to isolate the community, but veteran-owned alternatives activated instantly, maintaining critical services. Power grids under attack, Jason reported, coordinating with their utility network. But our backup systems are online. Community never loses power. Alisa's security teams moved with military precision. Each cartel thrust met with prepared defense. The night sky glowed with controlled chaos, but Shadow Creek stood firm. They're targeting medical supplies now, Elena warned, directing response units, trying to cut off treatment options. But facing our veteran transport network, Harrison confirmed, watching their preparations activate, every route covered, every resource protected. The cartel's attack continued, but something was changing. Each explosion revealed their desperation. Each response demonstrated the community's resilience. Shadow Creek was witnessing a different kind of strength. Media's arriving in force, Cooper reported, watching news vehicles converge. State authorities, too, can't ignore this level of violence. Harrison felt the tactical shift. The cartel had abandoned their careful strategy of legitimate business, traded long-term control for immediate impact. But in doing so, they'd exposed their true nature. Alisa's radio carried constant updates of community response. Veteran-owned businesses already organizing reconstruction, support networks activating before the dust settled. The morning sun revealed the night's impact, damaged buildings, scarred streets, but also something stronger. Shadow Creek hadn't broken under attack. It had united. "They're pulling back," Alisa reported, tracking thermal signatures in retreat. Multiple teams withdrawing. They didn't expect this level of resistance. Harrison watched through high-powered optics as Cartel operators abandoned positions. Their coordinated attack had failed to achieve its objective, breaking the community's spirit. Elena's medical teams continued their work, treating minor injuries while documenting every attack. State investigators are on site now, federal authorities responding too. The day emerged fully, revealing Shadow Creek's transformation. What had started as targeted destruction had become something else, proof of the community's true strength. Veteran reconstruction teams already moving in, Jason reported, coordinating their business network. Every damaged building will be rebuilt stronger. Harrison felt the familiar satisfaction of successful defense, but this victory was different. It wasn't about destroying an enemy, it was about protecting something stronger than fear. The cartel had committed everything to this attack, abandoned their careful facade of legitimate business. But in doing so, they'd revealed the truth Shadow Creek needed to see. The difference between control and protection, between fear and strength, between those who destroyed and those who rebuilt. Shadow Creek had witnessed its true defenders, seen the power of warriors united by purpose rather than profit. The community would rebuild stronger than before. Victory hadn't come through superior force or violence. It had come through something the cartel hadn't counted on, the unbreakable bonds between warriors who had found their way home. State and federal authorities descended on Shadow Creek as dawn broke, finding a community transformed not by destruction, but by unity. Harrison watched from his ranch's observation post as investigative teams documented the cartel's exposed operations, each piece of evidence revealing the full scope of their infiltration. "They're finding everything," Alisa reported, coordinating with law enforcement. Financial records, shipping manifests, corrupted officials, their entire network laid bare by last night's desperation. Razor's riders maintained their patrols, but their purpose had shifted. Now they guided investigation teams to hidden facilities, documented secret routes, revealed the infrastructure the cartel had built beneath legitimate business. "Medical boards under investigation," Elena confirmed, reviewing official reports. "Their targeted pressure on our program opened a trail straight to cartel connections." Sheriff Cooper arrived with fresh intelligence as federal teams swept through Thompson's ranch. Found their command center hidden under the new barn. Professional, set up, communications, surveillance, everything they used to control the region. Harrison observed through thermal imaging as more cartel assets were exposed. Their hasty retreat had left behind a wealth of evidence. They abandoned their careful facade, showed their true nature, and their true weakness, Alisa added, monitoring cleanup operations. They thought fear could outlast loyalty, didn't understand what they were really fighting. Diana Reyes's arrest played out across morning news broadcasts. The Economic Development Council's corruption exposed as federal agents discovered links to cartel financing. Her corporate smile finally shattered under the weight of evidence. Luke Mitchell's truck approached, carrying confirmation of their victory. "They're gone from our place," he reported, relief evident in his voice. "Dad's got full access again. Feds found their processing facility hidden in the new storage buildings." Harrison absorbed these developments with tactical satisfaction. The cartel's desperate attack had achieved the opposite of its intention. Instead of breaking the community, it had exposed their entire operation. The state investigators at the county offices, Cooper reported, his radio crackling with updates. Commissioners singing like a bird, trying to cut a deal, naming names, revealing connections. Jason Chen arrived with news from their business network. Every cartel-connected operation being investigated, their whole economic control system unraveling, communities choosing veteran-owned alternatives. The day progressed with methodical precision as more evidence emerged. Harrison's veterans guided authorities through the cartel's infrastructure, their military training helping identify hidden operations. They're finding similar patterns in other communities, Alisa noted, reviewing federal reports. Shadow Creek was meant to be their model, proving they could control a region through legitimate business. Elena coordinated with state medical authorities as licensing boards underwent scrutiny. Every pressure point they used against us revealed another layer of corruption, their whole network collapsing. Razor's riders reported more discoveries across Shadow Creek, each legitimate business front now exposed, each economic pressure point revealed as part of larger control system. A helicopter approached, federal this time, carrying high-level investigators. Shadow Creek's transformation had drawn national attention, revealing a new method of combating cartel influence. Marcus Vega's capture played out with professional efficiency. Federal teams tracking him to a safe house, his arrest revealing more connections. The cartel's enforcer found himself facing the full weight of exposed evidence. "This is bigger than Shadow Creek," Cooper observed, watching another convoy of investigators arrive. They're finding similar operations across the border region, communities being controlled through legitimate business. Harrison remembered similar moments from his Delta Force days, when removing one piece of enemy infrastructure revealed entire networks. The cartel had built their influence carefully, but their desperation had exposed everything. Alisa's radio carried constant updates as more evidence emerged, each discovery revealing the extent of cartel infiltration, each investigation confirming the community's suspicions. The afternoon brought more revelations. Thompson's ranch yielded detailed records of cartel operations, Mitchell's property revealed sophisticated distribution networks, the facade of legitimate business stripped away completely. "They're cooperating now," Cooper reported, monitoring interrogations. Local officials, business owners, everyone involved, trying to avoid federal charges by providing information. Harrison watched through high-powered optics as more cartel assets were seized. Their careful investment in Shadow Creek had become evidence of criminal enterprise, their legitimate businesses exposed as fronts. Elena's medical teams continued, documenting evidence while treating the community. Each pressure point the cartel had used against them now formed part of the federal case. "Veteran network expanding," Jason announced, coordinating reconstruction. "Other communities requesting our model." They want protection against cartel infiltration. Alisa's security teams maintained vigilance, but their focus had shifted. Now they protected evidence sites, supported federal operations, ensured nothing was overlooked. The evening brought confirmation of their victory's scope. Shadow Creek had not just resisted cartel control, it had exposed a sophisticated method of community infiltration. State authorities implementing our veteran business model, Cooper reported, reviewing official recommendations, using it to identify and prevent cartel influence in other regions. Harrison felt the familiar satisfaction of successful operation, but this victory carried greater significance. They hadn't just defended their community, they'd created a template for resistance. Alisa's final reports for the day confirmed complete cartel withdrawal. Their infrastructure exposed, their legitimate covers compromised, their method of control revealed. The sun set over a changed Shadow Creek. Federal teams continued their work, documenting evidence that would impact communities across the border region. But the real transformation had already occurred. Elena's medical program received official recognition, its resistance to cartel pressure becoming a model for maintaining independent healthcare. Other communities requested guidance in establishing similar services. Harrison watched his veterans coordinate with authorities, their military training now serving a different kind of mission. The cartel had chosen Shadow Creek carefully, seeing its isolation as weakness. Instead, they'd created something unprecedented, a community of warriors united against corruption, their strength built on bonds stronger than fear or control. The real victory wasn't in destroying cartel infrastructure. It was in building something they couldn't corrupt or control, something that could spread to other communities facing similar threats. Shadow Creek had proved that true strength came not from fear or force, but from warriors who understood that some battles were won through creating, not destroying. The community would rebuild stronger than before, but more importantly, it would serve as an example, showing others that cartel influence could be resisted not just through force, but through unity. Victory had come not through superior violence, but through something the cartel hadn't counted on: the unbreakable bonds between warriors who had found their way home. And those bonds would spread, creating networks of resistance stronger than any criminal enterprise. Shadow Creek had shown the way. Others would follow. The real transformation was just beginning. As federal teams completed their investigation, Shadow Creek emerged not just as a victory against cartel influence, but as a blueprint for community resistance. Harrison's veteran network expanded across the border region, each new operation strengthening the bonds between warriors who had found purpose in protecting others. The ranch continued its rehabilitation program, but now it served a dual purpose: healing veterans, while training them to build and protect similar communities. What had started as one disabled veteran's stand against corruption had become a movement. Shadow Creek had proven that true strength came not from fear or force, but from warriors who understood that some battles were won through unity and purpose. The cartel had tried to break a community, but instead created something unbreakable. If you enjoyed this story of courage, unity, and unexpected strength, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We have more incredible stories waiting for you that will inspire and amaze. Your support means everything to us.